counterpart of Pascal's wager comes in. Okay, here the wise person considers, okay, if there is no other world, then on the dissolution of the body, this good person will have made himself safe enough. That is the person who accepts the wrong view. So he says there is no other world beyond this present one. There is no other world. And so in that respect, he's safe. He doesn't have to face any undesirable consequences. But if there is another world beyond the present one, then on the dissolution of the body after death, he'll be reborn in one of the bad realms, even in hell. That is, assuming the person not only holds that there's no life beyond the present one, but on the basis of that wrong view, he engages in wrong actions, wrong intentions, then leaves upon wholesome behavior and engages in unwholesome behavior. Okay, so the person behaves in unwholesome, unvirtuous ways, and since there is a life beyond the present one, after death, he is reborn in one of the unfortunate realms, one of the bad realms. Okay, so now this person reflects whether or not the word of those good teachers is true. Let me assume there is no other world. Okay, so if there is no other world, this good person who adopts this view will be censored by the wise as an immoral person, one of wrong view who holds the doctrine of nihilism. In Indian society in the Buddha's time, it was considered the respectable thing for an upright, virtuous citizen to accept the belief in rebirth and in the law of karma. It's a little bit like if you're living in Middle America, small town Middle America, where everybody goes to church on Sunday, and if you're just seen hanging around the streets on Sunday and people ask, why aren't you going to church? Then you say, well, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in any life beyond the present one. Then people start chatting and avoiding you, and they look down on you, and they say, he's an atheist, a sinner, going to hell. So that's the way you would be treated. I guess in Indian society, in the Buddha's way, if you explicitly denied any belief in lives beyond the present one, then you will be censored as an immoral person, one of wrong view. Okay, so these are the consequences, even if there is no other world. Okay, on the other hand, if there is another world, then this person who adopts this belief in nihilism has made an unlucky throw. It's really using the analogy, the metaphor of gambling. He's made an unlucky throw on both counts. First, in this life itself, he's criticized by the wise as being an immoral, stupid person. And then, on the dissolution of the body after death, he is reborn in a bad state of rebirth. And so by reflecting in this way, then this person has, or by acting in this way, this person has wrongly accepted and undertaken this incontrovertible teaching in such a way that extends only to one side and it excludes the wholesome alternative. Okay, so this is what happens with the one who holds the view, there is no other world. So if there is no other world, then he doesn't have to worry about his fate after death. But if there is another world, then he has something to worry about. He goes to a bad realm. if there is no other world, still he's blamed by the wise as being an immoral person. But if one, I've lost my reasoning. But if there is another world, if there is another world, then he goes to the bad destination after death, and he is blamed by the wise in this life itself. Okay, maybe anybody have any questions about this reasoning here, or any comments?
The question is, the phrase, it extends only to one side.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. And excludes. Well, he seems he's assuming there that if you don't have the right belief about rebirth and an afterlife, that then you'll be an evil person, kind of like Dostoevsky's assumption that if there is no God, everything is permissible, and so people will just eat each other.
I think the point, okay, he has wrongly accepted and undertaken this incontrovertible teaching in such a way that it extends only to one side and excludes the wholesome alternative. I think the point here is that his line of reflection will be justifiable only insofar as if there is no other world, then on the dissolution after death, he doesn't have to go to a bad destination. In other words, as said in the first sentence of this paragraph, then on the dissolution of the body, this good person will have made himself safe enough. So that is the one side in which he protects himself. But if there is another world, okay, even if there is no other world, then he still gets into trouble because he's blamed and criticized by others, so he loses out on that front. But again, if there is another world, then he loses out on both fronts. So you could say that there are actually 4 consequences. If there is no other world, what happens after death, and how do people treat one in this life? If there is another world, what happens after death, and how do people regard one in this life? So these 4 possible consequences, if, okay, he asserts there is no life after death, he only gets 1 out of the 4. That is, he doesn't have to face a rebirth in hell after death, but he still has to face 3 bad consequences. Whereas if there is the life after death, then he loses out on 3 fronts, actually 2 fronts. He gets the bad rebirth, I'm sorry, we're uncertain whether or not there is a life after death. So if he asserts there is no life after death, then he wins only in 1 out of the 4 possibilities, in that he doesn't have to face an unhappy rebirth. But still, he's criticized in this life. There's still the possibility that there is another life, so that he'll have to face a bad rebirth. And he'll be blamed by others. I'm not sure that I'm completely clear about that. Okay, maybe we'll take the next section here. Okay, now this is going to take the positive counterpart. This is the view of what I call affirmationism, Attikavada. So here we have the recluses and Brahmins who hold the view that there is what is given, there's offerings, there's charity, and so on. There are good and virtuous ascetics who have realized the nature of this world and could teach it on the basis of their direct knowledge. Okay, now what is the effect of that belief on their conduct? It's expected that they will avoid 3 types of bad conduct: bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, and mental misconduct, and that they'll undertake and practice 3 types of wholesome conduct: good bodily conduct, good verbal conduct, and good mental conduct. And the reason is because these ascetics see in unwholesome qualities the danger, degradation, and defilement, and they see in wholesome qualities, in wholesome states, the blessing of renunciation, the aspect of cleansing. Okay, now the Buddha is going to follow through additional consequences of their belief. And here again he lays down definite statements about what is right and what is wrong. So he says, since there actually is another world, one who holds the view there is another world has right view. So this is the elementary form of right view, is accepting the existence of a life after death and accepting the law of karmic causation, the effects of good and bad deeds. Okay, since there actually is another world, one who intends, or maybe more fully, one who acts on one whose actions are motivated by the belief that there is another world, has right intention. So when one accepts the belief that there are lives beyond the present one, then one will be careful in what kind of motives one allows to serve as the springs of one's activities. Okay, since there actually is another world, one who makes the statement, there is another world, has right speech. So this is one type of right speech, is affirming the existence of lives beyond the present one, the existence of rebirth and the operation of karma. Okay, then since there is another world, one who says there is another world is speaking in harmony with the view of the arhats who know for themselves the other world. And then when one accepts the belief in another world, then if one convinces another that there is another world, one is convincing him to accept true Dhamma or a good teaching. And then because one convinces another to accept a true teaching, one does not praise oneself and disparage others. I think it's possible, to convince another in argument. You have an argument whether there are lives beyond the present one, whether there's karma causation. It seems to me that you could convince another to accept that, and if he accepts it, one could become proud and then start boasting about oneself and disparaging other beliefs. Is that true, or am I a little mistaken about that?
Of course it's true. It's the oldest story in the book.
Excuse me?
It's the oldest story in the book.
Yeah. Why do you say it's the oldest story in the book?
Oh, come on. World history, Bhante, is replete with horrible religious leaders. Horrible religious people. In world history, no matter what culture you go, there are good people. I'm not saying that there aren't good people.
Yeah.
But there's just, I can give you story after story where I'm looking at whatever religion in whatever culture, whether you go back in time or even into the present. It's just the way of things. It's people, unfortunately, and what they do with things.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of, in Sri Lanka in the 19th century, there was a famous debate that took place at a city or town called Panadura. It's known as the Panadura debate. At that time, Christianity was very strong in Sri Lanka because there had been the first wave of Catholic missionaries sent over by the Portuguese. Then in the 19th century, when the British established a strong presence there, they supported the Christian missionaries, and so many of the upper class, upper middle class, Sinhalese, well, both Sinhalese and Tamils, converted to Christianity. It was considered almost like the respectable thing for any upright member of the upper class to become a Christian. But the great majority, or at least the majority of people in the country, especially in the countryside, the small towns, were still the Buddhists. Then the contention between the two religions, non-violent, but still taking the form of polemics, debates, reached a point where a famous debate was held in the town of Apannaka between a Christian minister, I think from the Anglican Church, and a Buddhist monk who was fluent in English and very knowledgeable about, he'd studied Christianity for the purpose of engaging it in debate. And so the two had a debate. I tried to read a record of the debate, and it was really difficult for me to follow the arguments. They just seemed so obscure. But the general consensus was that the Buddhist monk, Gunananda, I think was his name, won the debate. And the Buddhists throughout Sri Lanka were in an uproar. It wasn't that they didn't pride themselves or their representative or disparage others, but they were, I think, at the end of the debate, they lifted the monk up on their shoulders and carried him around the town, applauding. So we see human emotions seem to be pretty much the same. Then eventually word of that debate somehow got into the newspaper, which came into an American newspaper, which came, it was, a report about the debate was published in an American newspaper, and there was an American gentleman named Henry Stale Olcott, who was one of the co-founder of the Theosophical Society, living in New Jersey, who read the report of that debate, and he and the founder of the Theosophical Society, Madam H.P. Blavatsky, they decided they had to go to Sri Lanka to support the Buddhists. And so they arrived in the town of Gaul on a ship, having written in advance saying that they wanted to receive the 3 refuges and 5 precepts and become officially Buddhists, which they did. And this sent waves of exhilaration through Sri Lanka that 2 white people from the West had come to our shores just in the midst of this period where this bitter contention between the Christians and the Buddhists, and they've embraced Buddhism. Of course, they went on to interpret it very much along their own theosophical lines, but this was a big boost to the, call it the religious pride of the Sri Lankan Buddhists. Excuse me. Oh, this is recording. Okay. Okay, so anyway, just continuing with the text. So it says, he does not praise himself and disparage others. I guess this will be a person who has some degree of control over his mind, doesn't let himself be swept away by ordinary human emotions. Okay, so any corrupt conduct that he formerly had engaged in is abandoned, and pure virtue is substituted. And this right view, right intention, right speech, first 3 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, non-opposition to noble ones, to the arahants, convincing another to accept true dharma, avoiding self-praise and disparagement of others, these several wholesome qualities common to being with right view as their condition. So based on the view that there is another world beyond the present one, that there are results of good and bad actions, then all of these other wholesome states arise. Okay, now we come again to the method by which a wise person reflects on this view. Okay, again, this is the converse side of the Pascal's wager, the Buddhist version of Pascal's wager. If there is another world, then with the breakup of the body after death, this good person, the one who accepts this view, will be reborn in a happy destination because he has good karmic forces behind him, right view, right intention, right speech, and so on. Okay, so now he says, whether or not the word of these good ascetics, good teachers is true, let me assume that there is no other world, that there is no other life. Still, this good person who acts on the supposition that there is another world will be praised by the wise as a good person, one who holds right view, the doctrine of affirmation. And actually, these are even big, sort of loaded words in India to this day. The two words in Sanskrit, they're still known by their Sanskrit forms. So the word that's translated rather awkwardly, one who holds the doctrine of affirmation, this in Sanskrit is astika. And sort of any decent person in India, even today, is expected to be an astika, one who affirms belief in other realms. Whereas the opposite of that, one who, we have that in paragraph 9. Again, it's rather awkwardly expressed in the middle of paragraph 9. One who holds the doctrine of nihilism. In Sanskrit, it's nastika. And just like the Sanskrit nastika suggests in English the word nasty. I don't know if there's any connection between the two words, but to be called nastika is a very nasty designation. It's like being called, maybe today people speak about, at least in Middle America, they'll speak with horrors, the atheist. If one is a nastika, it means one is upsetting, challenging the whole social structure, the whole structure on which society rests. You know, if you're a nastika, you probably kill your children and eat them for dinner. Or at least people will spread rumors about the nastika. Like exactly like the word, yeah, being called a terrorist today. Okay, so assuming that there is no other world, still the person who believes that there is will be respected by others as a virtuous person. He is an astika, one who has an affirmative outlook on life, so to speak. On the other hand, if there is another world, then this person who holds the view of another world has made the lucky throw on both counts. He's praised by the wise here and now, and then on the dissolution of the body after death, because he holds right view, forms right intentions, speaks rightly, and engages in good actions based on his view, then he will likely be reborn in a happy destination, even in the heavenly world. And so he's rightly accepted and undertaken this incontrovertible teaching in such a way that it extends to both sides and excludes the wholesome alternative. Okay, maybe at this point, then I'll ask whether there's any questions. Please. We used to have what I call the floating microphone, the hand microphone. Maybe it's not. Okay, please go ahead and ask. Just speak loudly.
I sort of have a question. You said it was the Buddhists in India, right, that would like chastise or basically censor someone who wouldn't believe in higher realms.
Say again.
You said it was Buddhists in India that would basically censor somebody for not believing in the higher realms.
It would be the general outlook in society, not a particular person, but it would be the general outlook was that one would be expected to believe in things like rebirth and other realms of existence.
Okay.
So if one didn't accept that view, people would look on him as being a person of wrong view, someone they would suspect one of being a person of immoral behavior.
All right, so that was the people, right? That was the people?
It was a general opinion, yeah.
Okay, that was it.
Yeah, Tracy.
I'm curious about your view. There are a couple of contemporary British lay teachers.
Contemporary?
British lay teachers.
Yeah.
Stephen Batchelor is one of the most celebrated.
Yeah.
And John Peacock, who are really making a career almost out of their... Batchelor has a book called Confessions of a Buddhist Atheist, where he takes that Kalama Sutta almost as if, as you said, it's the center of the Buddhist teachings, and presents the Buddhist not just as a rationalist, but like the first existentialist, a person of no belief. And I've been curious for a long time, having just heard Peacock recently, what your view is of this, of presenting the Buddha like we've had it wrong all along. And he really doesn't, he really never said he believed in any next world.
If they are set, I don't know John Peacock's writing, I know Stephen Batchelor's writing, it's a little ambiguous what Stephen Batchelor is understanding the Buddha. Sometimes he seems to be saying that the Buddha, well, basically what he seems to be saying is that the Buddha just accepted the teachings of karma and rebirth as part of the Indian cultural baggage, but his teaching of, say, the Four Noble Truths, 3 characteristics, the practice of mindfulness, that he uses the expression of pragmatic, existential therapy, something like that, which can still be valid even if one completely casts away those teachings which come from the Indian heritage. What I would say, I don't want to dismiss that view out of hand. What I would definitely reject is the view that this is actually representing what the Buddha himself taught. Because if you look at all of the Buddhist texts that have come down from all the schools through the centuries, even going back to the oldest texts like the Nikayas, the Agamas, it's very clear that the Buddha taught, based on his own direct experience, the working of the law of karmic causation, the existence of other realms of existence, and the process of rebirth by which one goes from one realm to another. So if one says that the Buddha didn't teach this, or this was just part of the Indian cultural heritage, it's quite definitely contradicted by what one finds in the texts. It could be that they are just using this method because they know that disbelief in any kind of rebirth, other realms of existence is widespread in contemporary Western society. And so they might be seeing this as a way to present the Buddhist teachings and practices as a way sort of to get a foothold and to make them convincing to contemporary skeptics. If they're using the teaching in that way, it's still not my own approach, but I would say that it has a certain justification.